Perth Linux Users Group, talking Linux and open source.
Right, my name is James Henstridge. I'm giving this talk about how you can build a static websites using the Hugo static site generator. So again, if you are sort of building a website, probably one of the more common options people choose is a system like WordPress, which is a very, it's a very nice system. It's got a lot of features, but it's non-trivial to host it yourself, and systems like Hugo, they can provide an alternative which might be cheaper or easier for to host. I'll be covering some of the benefits of the static website generators, how you can build a website using Hugo, and how you can deploy it for free or very low cost. As far as WordPress, I would say WordPress is a great piece of engineering. If you need the features of WordPress, I would definitely recommend you use WordPress. But for a lot of websites, I'd say you probably don't need everything that WordPress provides, and so it might be worth looking at an alternative. One of the issues with WordPress is since it's a large PHP application, it means that the customer, any of the people who visit your website, they're directly interacting with the code, and if there are security vulnerabilities, they could potentially if there are security vulnerabilities, they might be able to exploit them. So you do need to make sure that you're keeping it up to date. It also has its own backup and restore system. So if you were just running your normal backup system, you might need to do something special to make sure that your WordPress site gets backed up in a state which you'll be able to restore it again in case of a failure, or if you need to move to a new system or something. And there's a number of parts which can make scaling a bit difficult. As far as the security stuff, this is sort of just, I was taking a look at the NIST vulnerability search. This was just sort of security vulnerabilities in the core of WordPress. And if you expand the search to handle all WordPress plugins, there is a lot there, but of course, most plugins, you're not going to be vulnerable to a plugin vulnerability unless you're using the plugin, so it's not really fair to include those. But this does sort of mean that you can't really install WordPress, forget about it, and just leave it up on the internet, because there's probably going to be problems which need to be patched. So it's something you're going to have to actively look after. As far as scaling goes, this was a nice little diagram I found on Amazon's Amazon Web Services site about their best practice for building a WordPress site, which will scale well. So it's most people who are hosting a WordPress site, they won't need anything quite as big as this, because a lot of these components could sort of be shrunk down to running on a single virtual machine or something, but it is kind of instructive about what a WordPress site actually entails. So I think the big things you can see here is you've got the WordPress instance here, which is sort of a web server running the PHP code for WordPress. You've got a MySQL database, which they've got two of them here, sort of a master database and a read replica. In a smaller system, you might only have a single master database, but if you get really popular, you don't want to get into a point where all the visitors hitting the public site 30 seconds. Sorry, did we lose the recording or? Audio. Audio, okay. So this is the equivalent for a static site generator. We basically cut out all of the dynamic portion of the site. So we basically just got something which can store some static files and a web server or a content delivery network which can provide them to users, and some DNS. So again, a static site generator, a static site's basically, it's at its heart, it's basically just a bunch of files sitting on a hard drive with the web server in front serving it up. There's no code which runs when the users visit the site, and no server-side code at least, which basically means you could potentially set up a static site. If you're installing security updates on your server, then if you've got automatic security updates installed on your server, then you could basically forget about it, which is kind of something I'd like to do, because some of my sites, I forget about them for years at a time. So I like to sort of have something which I don't have to pay attention to. And it's sort of relying on the bare minimum from a hosting provider, which is useful because that means you're not really tied into the services provided by any one hosting provider. If your hosting provider doubles their hosting fees, then it's not going to be very difficult for you to switch to someone else. And one of the reasons we're looking at static site generators in particular is that it's not the 90s anymore, and you probably don't want to be writing all of your HTML by hand, especially if you want to get a site which is going to be easily navigated so that you don't sort of end up with dead ends. And if you want to make a site which is going to be easily navigated on a phone, or provides things like RSS feeds or sitemaps or potentially AMP, that's the accelerated mobile pages stuff, or various other features. So a static site generator is a tool which can help you sort of pre-process your content so that it'll take care of the boring parts and you can just sort of concentrate on what you want to be doing on your site. So the static site generator in particular I was going to talk about is called Hugo. This is a static site generator. You write your content in Markdown, which is a simple textual format. There is a templating system which can take those Markdown files and generate the HTML and CSS and everything else. It's also got some tools to help you manage the CSS if you want, and it also has a strong theming system, which sort of means that if you're happy taking someone's existing website design, you can just apply the theme and not even have to bother with the templates. And it's quite convenient for local development. It's got some tools to sort of make that somewhat more convenient than so you're not sort of regenerating everything after every change. If you want to install Hugo on a Linux system, for Ubuntu, I would recommend installing the snap package. The main reason for that is that it's managed by the Hugo developers. So as soon as they release a new version, you'll get it'll sort of be installed on your system within, say, 6 hours or something, depending on when your system refreshes. Hugo is also packaged in most of the common Linux distributions, so you can install it with apt or DNF, zipper, whatever. But that one will probably be whatever version of Hugo was current at the time that your distro was released. It's unlikely that it's going to be constantly updated like the snap. You can also download the binary just from the Hugo website, which that's one of the other ways you can go, but I think in general it's probably better to pick something which will get you automatic updates. If we're setting up a Hugo site, there's the Hugo command, and you can just run Hugo new site, and then the name of the directory where you want to put your site. This is just this is where the source code to the site will be, in essence. And then change directory into the site, and I'm just initializing a Git repository in the site as well. This is gives us this means that we can get some change management, so that if I'm updating the site, I can commit the changes. If things go wrong, I can back them out. So that gives us some level of change management, which is very useful if you're updating a website. Then some of the stuff which was recommended in the Hugo Quick Start Guide was to apply a theme. So here, just picking a theme called Anank, which I've been using it on my website because it looks kind of nice. It's fairly customizable, and it looks nice on a mobile phone as well, which is kind of nice. So we're using a Git sub module, which basically means that I can also control when the theme updates, because it's since it's stored, I would need to go into that directory, update the theme, then I can check to see if it works, and then commit to pull the new version of the sub module, which gives me more control over how the site builds. And finally, I'm just adding a bit of configuration to enable Git info. This is telling Hugo that my site is stored in Git, so when it's building the site, it can extract some information from the Git repository, such as the date you last modified each file, or what the email address, the username and the email address of the person who updated the file. So this is metadata which it can use when it's generating the pages. When I've run Hugo new site, it'll blast a whole lot of default files into the directory. We've got a configuration file. We've got a directory called content, where we'll put all of our Markdown files for the website. We've got archetypes, which is, in the olden days, I probably would have called this a template, because these are these are files which you use as it'll copy one of the archetype files to start a new page when you use Hugo new page instead. Layouts holds all of the templates which are used to build the website, which might be empty if you're just using all the defaults from your theme. Themes, that's where we're storing the theme. And then static, if you've got files which you just want to stick on the website without any processing by Hugo. And data is something I haven't used at all in any of the sites I built with Hugo. When we're building pages under the content directory, basically these are just Markdown files which will correspond to pages which appear on the site. So for the most part, if I put a file called foo.md in the content directory, then it will be served up as on the website as /foo. But if I want more than just the Markdown, I can also represent a page as a bundle, which means that I have a directory called foo, and inside that, the Markdown file would be called index.md, and then let's say that I've got a couple of images or something else associated with that page. They'll be copied into the site with that page next to it. So this is I found that's quite a useful thing. Then the last case is a branch bundle, which is when we've got one page with multiple pages underneath it, which is very common on a website. In this case, we've got an index.md file, an _index.md file, which is what is displayed when you're looking at that directory rather than any of the pages underneath it. And again, any of the any of the pages within the branch bundle, they can also be page bundles like this Baz page we've got here. The pages which in the Markdown pages are sort of stored as a blob of YAML, which is sort of a structured metadata format, and followed by the page content stored in Markdown. YAML is you could probably think of it as sort of a slightly more human readable version of JSON. I say that as sort of a simple idea because if you actually read the YAML spec, it's far more complicated than JSON. But if you stick to the simple aspects, you'll end up with something which is probably easier to write than JSON, which is why these systems are using it. So yeah, you can sort of have integers, you can have floating point numbers, strings, you can have Boolean values, you can have dictionaries of key and key value pairs, which is usually this is the kind of information you'll often put in you'll often find in the metadata at the start of the page. You can also have hierarchical stuff so that the value for some particular key might be another dictionary of keys and values, or you can have arrays which sort of use a dash syntax, or you can have like arrays of dictionaries. It's basically a fully recursive type system, so you can sort of make it arbitrarily nested like this. For the most part, the metadata you stick in the page it can be generic, but there are some bits of metadata there which have special meaning within Hugo. For instance, the page title will often come as whatever the title of the page would be. What would show up as the title in the window title when you're browsing the web page. You can have a date assigned to the page, saying when the page is published. You can have a draft flag, so you can have pages which, if a page is set as a draft, then it's not going to appear on the website, which is kind of useful if you've been working on something, you do want to commit it, but you're not ready for the public to see it, so that's kind of useful. You can also override what the URL of a particular page has rather than getting the default URL which Hugo assigns. And you can also provide aliases, which is kind of useful if you're migrating a website from some other system to Hugo and you've got some nice URLs for your Hugo site, but you had some less nice URLs with the old system, but you still want anyone who's following links to still find the new location of all your pages. And because you're sort of keeping track of the aliases on the page itself, that means you can sort of see all of the aliases at the destination rather than rather than going in the other direction where you sort of might, if you moved the page somewhere else, then the aliases wouldn't follow it. So that's kind of useful. As far as Markdown is concerned, it's basically just like writing plain text in your emails. Sort of, you've got new lines separating paragraphs, and there's some simple formatting, like you can have your ordered lists, just writing 1 dot something, 2 dot blah blah blah. You can have bulleted lists. You can create pre-formatted text by just using sort of 3 backticks on a line by itself, and then you've got some pre-formatted stuff afterward. Then the text there will just be passed through straight like a pre-element in HTML. You can go italic, bold, and monospace text as well, just within your paragraphs, and you can specify links. This is one form of a link. There's other ways that you can do it in Markdown, but this is generally enough to sort of get started. There's also a concept of shortcodes, which provides some more stuff you can use inside your pages. This is kind of useful if you've got things like you want to link to a YouTube video or something, which is something we've used a few times on the Plug website, where we've had some pages for some old events which we'd recorded, like we're recording this talk, and we can put a link through to that YouTube video. It's sort of, there's a non-trivial amount of HTML which you've got to do to do a YouTube embed, and by using the shortcode, basically it means that if Google changes the way you do YouTube embeds in the future, if Hugo gets updated, then you don't have to go through and update all your pages again. So like, if you were sort of using old Flash embeds and you want to switch to the HTML5 ones, this wouldn't have been a problem, but I don't think Hugo existed when YouTube was still using Flash. But there's also a few other things like there are some shortcodes which are designed for letting you do syntax highlighting, and it's also possible to define some more. When you're building a website, you can just run the Hugo command by itself, which will basically just scan through everything you've got in the all of the content, all of the pages which you've got in the content directory, and apply the templates and output the website, and you end up with basically what you would upload to your web server or something in the public directory, which you could then serve directly. So that's, in general, that'll run like in probably a second or less than that, depending on how big your website is. Maybe a couple of seconds if you're using some of the image transformations or anything like that, but in general it's fairly fast. When I'm doing local development though, there's a built-in web server with Hugo, so I can basically just run Hugo server. I've also included the -d parameter on the slide here, which tells Hugo to include all of the drafts in the thing, so that I can see what it's going to look like when I'm actually ready to publish things. Point my web browser at localhost 1313, and this will look similar to what the site would look like when it's published, but it injects a bit of JavaScript so that the web browser continuously asks the server if the page is up to date. So if I edit any of the pages, Hugo will notice, and it'll automatically update it. So if I've got like my text editor on one side and the web browser on the other, and I just sort of save what I've changed, and then the page updates without me having to refresh or anything like that. It's basically it makes quite a nice development environment if you're really attached to a text editor like Emacs or VI or something. Probably some VS Code these days. Yeah. One of the other features, it is possible to, if you're sort of running a blog or something on your website, it's also possible to have all of your pages arranged in sort of categorized by year or month or something. So basically in the configuration file, I could just sort of say that all of the pages which I've put in a single directory under blog, for instance, rather than just publishing them directly, I want to get them in, I'll give them all URLs which are based on the year and the month, based on the date which was specified in their front matter. And if I go to just sort of site name /blog, it will run a template which will display the most recent entries, and it will, depending on what the template does, it could sort of be paginating them. So if I've got, say, 500 blog entries, it might be showing 10 a page or something like that, with next and previous links. There is also support for creating linking to related pages. So this is kind of a useful feature if you've got a large website where you don't really want to sort of directly manage what the related pages are, but like you can add sort of some keywords into the pages, and then if there's enough keyword matches, then it might say these two pages are related, and that will be some information which is available to the templates. So in this particular case, it's probably not a great example, because I've sort of set the threshold lower than the rating. So this one would just basically mean that if any keyword on a page matched any other page, then they would be considered related. But it would also mean that if there were more keywords in common between the two pages, then they would be more related, and it would order them like that. And in general, if you're using a theme which sort of displays related pages, and that could be kind of useful. I know this is sort of a bit dry. I've got a demo coming at the end. Now, of course, the other part of this is you want to actually get your website up and available for people to look at. So one of the nice things about Hugo, and it's also the same for some of these other static site generators, is that there's a number of companies who are providing services which will let you automatically publish your website from a Git repository. Whether you're hosting it on GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket, or whatever else. That sort of means that you're not sort of tied into any particular Git hosting, but I've generally used GitHub, which has been pretty happy with that. This basically means that you've got sort of the equivalent of continuous integration like you would have in software development, that if I'm making some changes to a website, if they all look nice locally, I'll commit them and I'll push them up to my Git repository, and one of these hosting services will notice that I've pushed the change, and it will build the website with Hugo and then automatically publish it, and I don't need to do anything else once everything is set up. The one I've sort of been using personally for some of this stuff is called Netlify. They offer a fairly generous free tier, which is sort of enough, which is, I found, easily enough for anything I've been doing. When I was first using it, basically, I think they only had sort of bandwidth caps, but they've now sort of also got a cap on the amount of time which your site generator can spend sort of building the site, which they cap at 300 minutes a month, which is kind of like that because people who run crypto miners basically mean that we can't have nice things anymore. But yeah, I mean, 300 minutes, build minutes a month. My personal website takes about a bit less than a minute to build. So within that free tier, I could build my website. I could push up like 10 changes every day of the month, and I'd probably still be within the free tier cap. And I'm getting nowhere near 100 gigabytes of traffic to my website, personal website. So in general, a lot of people are probably going to be able to handle the free tier, which is kind of nice. This Netlify also supports sort of having a repository hosted on GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket. It doesn't handle generic hosting providers because it actually uses the API of each of these hosting providers to be able to get notified when changes get pushed and various other things, and sort of provide various other integration, which I'll demonstrate a bit later. When you sign up for Netlify and create a site, it will give you a free domain name under netlify.app, which is fine if you don't really care about the domain too much. But if you want to have it under your host, you can also point a custom domain at Netlify, and then it'll make your website available from that domain as well. So that's like $15 a year or something to register an Australian domain, and if that registrar also provides DNS hosting, then that's basically all you're going to be. You'd basically be only paying you $15 a year to host your website, which is kind of nice. One of the other nice things with Netlify is that it will automatically generate TLS certificates for your website, so you can access the website over HTTPS. It uses Let's Encrypt, which is a service providing free TLS certificates programmatically. So basically, you don't have to do anything. It'll just keep on renewing the certificate for your website as you go. And it also provides, like many of these other sites, it's running on a CDN, so you'll get decent performance in Australia, decent performance in the US, decent performance in Europe, and basically you don't have to care about it. You get all of this without having to sort of manage multiple servers or anything. One of the other features it's got is deploy previews. So rather than just checking for changes which are sort of in the main branch of your Git repository, if you create a pull request, it will build the pull request and make it available at its own URL. So you can sort of see, if you're sort of collaborating with someone, they can sort of propose some changes to your website, and you can see what they look like before merging those changes. I found that I've mostly been just doing everything on my own for my own personal website, but like that could be useful for something like Plug. I don't know if we've sort of got enough changes going through on Plug at the moment for that to make sense, to be particularly useful, but it's there if we did want to use something like that. One of the other options is GitHub itself. Naturally, if you're using GitHub's pages facility, it's only going to work if your repository is hosted on GitHub, which is probably not a problem if you're relying on them to serve your website as well. At the moment, you'll need to use GitHub Actions continuous integration system to build your website with Hugo. Basically, you'd set up an action to run whenever there's some changes pushed to the website, and it will run Hugo to build it, and then you'll check in the built version of the website to a special branch called GH Pages, and then GitHub will deploy that to their CDN for you. I think there's some changes coming down the line which would mean that you wouldn't need to sort of check in the built version of the website into your repository to work on GitHub Pages, but at the moment I don't think they've put out all the documentation for this, but like you can actually sort of see some special GitHub Actions workflows running when it actually does the deploy, which makes it look like something. There's going to be some better support coming for that kind of thing in the future. Like Netlify, you'll get a free website domain to display your website, and you can also point a custom domain at GitHub, and it will display your website there, and also publish. It'll also handle acquiring Let's Encrypt TLS certificates for you. And again, there's more information on the Hugo website about setting all of that up. GitLab is probably the second most popular Git hosting service, and they've also got a website hosting facility which is also built around their continuous integration system. This time you don't have to. One of the nice things, you don't have to commit all of the built version of the website back to the Git repository like you do with GitHub, but they don't have as good support for setting up TLS certificates. They will serve your website with a TLS certificate, but you've got to provide that certificate to them. And if you are using a free Let's Encrypt certificate, that means you're going to have to do this again in 90 days or less than 90 days, because that's how long the Let's Encrypt certificates last. Yeah. I'd say probably for a lot of people, they've probably got a site which would mostly fit into the capabilities of static site generators. But if you only need a few dynamic features, then you might be able to handle this with some external utilities, external services, which can fill in those gaps. The main things I've seen is people who want to have like a comment field on their blog articles, or sometimes you might have a contact form on your website or something. For commenting systems, probably the most well-known one you've probably seen on various sites is called Disqus. There is some built-in support for configuring Disqus on a Hugo website, but I don't know if I would pick Disqus for a new website these days. It used to look really nice, but it's got a bunch of, if you don't have an ad blocker these days, it's sort of displaying a bunch of ads, and they changed their terms of service to allow them to track users between websites, so they can use what they deduce as your interests from visiting one website with Disqus comments to display ads on a second Disqus comments website. So maybe that wouldn't be, maybe you want to pick something else. One of the new ones which showed up is an open source one called Custis. It's open source, so you can host it yourself if you really care about, if you don't want to sort of be relying on any third parties, but they also offer a hosted service, so you can sort of sign up for an account for them, and they will basically host your comments for you, similar to what Disqus is doing. At the moment, their system is free, but they've on the website they're saying they might have a paid tier at some point in the future. I don't know whether they. I don't know. It's hard to tell how much what level of traffic you need to get before that'll be a problem, and it's not really clear when they're going to introduce that paid tier. As far as contact forms, again, there's a couple of services which provide, which will sort of provide sort of a free backend for your forms. On Netlify, one of the ways they're trying to make money is by providing sort of some services which a static site would need to sort of complement what they're getting out of Hugo or something. So one of the things I've got there is a form submission engine. So when a user fills out this form on your website, it sends the results to the Netlify Forms API, which will then email you, and I think you also get, you can look in the console, you can see a list of all of the submissions which have come through, and you could build whatever workflow you want on top of that. I think there is an API for sort of managing what's come through on the form submissions as well, but I haven't really looked into it too much. But yeah. There's also a couple of other companies like who provide similar things which aren't tied to a particular hosting system. FormSpark was one which seem to have a pretty generous free tier as well. Again, I think it's probably good to look at, with a lot of these ones, they are offering sort of a free tier and then pay if you're going above certain limits and stuff, which is, I think it's probably it's probably better than getting something which is sort of completely free, but it might disappear at any time. And if you are sort of making heavy use of some of these services, it's probably good to decide whether, if you think their services are worth paying for, then rather than building your own, then it's probably worth continuing. Again, sometimes you might need to do more than what you'll get from static systems, which is we've definitely we're definitely like that for the plug website, for instance, where most things are static, but we've got like a plug membership system built on top of PHP, which, so in it, sorry, Music's getting a bit annoying. Sorry. Yeah. In the plug case where we are self-hosting the website, that's basically just means we've got Apache sort of serving most files directly and pointing at PHP, pointing at the UGMM system for just one directory, which works pretty well. Of course, one of the other features, again, if you've got just a few dynamic features, would be to publish the dynamic bits at a separate domain name, which we probably could do for our UGMM system, for instance. And again, if you are only doing, if the dynamic parts are only being used infrequently, maybe something like AWS Lambda can be useful if you don't want to have a server running all the time to handle them. And of course, if you've got a site which needs everything to be dynamic, then you probably want to look at something other than a static site generator anyway. So yeah, those are things to keep in mind. I was going to show a demo here, so I'm just going to switch over to screen sharing from the slides and Big Blue button. Okay. Entire screen. Okay. So again, I've got my website, which again this is sort of built using Hugo. It looks kind of nice. If I'm in sort of a mobile view, it sort of nicely reformats itself. And I can sort of, I can navigate the website and it'll sort of automatically sort of display index, sort of listing pages for some of the, for various pages I've got on the website. So it generally works fairly well. I'll just sort of show you a bit about, this is sort of the source code directory for the same website. So is the text big enough and visible enough on there? So again, in the content directory, I've got Markdown files for all of those pages on the website. The entire website sort of looks like a branch bundle. So we've got an _index.md file, which represents the top of the website. And again, here we're sort of defining, I've got some metadata at the top, and then I've got just some fairly simple textual content for the actual website, for that web page. And I guess I'll, yep, so that, again, you can sort of see that basically shows exactly the same as what is a pretty one-to-one, good one-to-one sort of representation from the text version to the HTML version, which is kind of easy. Sorry? Yep, so it's the same link as we've got canonical, the same as over there. And again, like in that's, oh, sorry, Peter?
Could you hover over the link for an internal link?
Sure.
You can see how it's translated it from the...
Yeah, so that was this software. I've actually used a special template to do this, which is a bit annoying. It'd be nice if I could do the internal links in Hugo a bit easier, but yeah, in general, yeah, I could sort of give the path to the Markdown file, and it automatically. It is possible to generate those links with the templates. If we looked in that software directory, oops. Again, I've mostly got page bundles in here, and the index index page has basically just got a bit of text and doesn't have any of the, and everything else was automatically generated as from the all of the sub pages which are underneath it. So again, that's basically, I probably could have made this one just as sort of a page without a bundle, but yeah, I was doing most of them as bundles here. But again, we look at software directory. You can see Ubuntu desktop. Again, that looks basically the same as what we've got there. One thing which you might sort of notice is I've got this little comment here. This is sort of something I can use to automatically generate a description for the page. Anything above that that special comment is treated as the description, and in this listing page, it's picking up each of the sub pages. It's showing the title, which matches there, and then the description, which I've taken as a subset of the content there. And I've used a bunch of keywords here, Ubuntu, GNOME. So I guess we should probably see some related pages. I'm sorry, Nick. Yep.
One question. Is this still the Anarchy theme?
Yes. Yeah. So one of the things, Anank, it's set up. It is using the related content feature. So yeah, I haven't actually specified some of these other pages. So I've got some other pages which I tagged with Ubuntu or something, and it's sort of produced a small list of related content. And if I add some more stuff which turned out to be more related, then it would probably replace some of those things in that list. I guess one of the I did sort of mention that we can sort of. Oh, sorry, Niall.
Just from online, how to add those tags to the categories visible on the blog front page?
So you mean this bit at the top? Or which?
The tags that Ubuntu and desktop that you tag to that other page.
The keywords?
Just relate to other pages, so you
can
link them to the front page?
Okay, so I could there's some parts of the theme, like these top-level things, these sort of correspond to some of the top-level directories on the website. The theme sort of can automatically create those directories, and I can sort of customize some of how that works. But this related content, I'm just using this keyword system. So again, like here, I've sort of put in an Ubuntu tag in this page, and let's see. I think I used the same. So I got the same thing in in the Ubuntu phone page. So this one also used that keyword. So I mean, basically that's how that relationship goes. What were you asking for in particular?
Asking whether referenced another web page here, blogs.gnome.org.
Okay, that's like sidebar. Okay. That's I've currently got my blog sort of running on a WordPress instance hosted by GNOME.
Right.
So I can show you how that is. I've currently got that one. I've basically just sort of fudged the menu in Hugo. I've got this is my the main configuration file for the website, and I've basically just told it to point at this external site. At some point I probably want to migrate most of my blog articles onto my main website, but I haven't done that yet.
I think that covers the question.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe the question is how you could have a sidebar. So would you need a different theme?
So yeah, I mean, basically everything which you can see on this site outside of the main text is sort of being generated by the theme, but different themes, some themes sort of offer some level of configurability. So for instance, in this case, the theme sort of it builds up a menu at the top. In this case, they've used a menu system, something I hadn't talked about, but this sort of I could sort of configure some of the menu just from the configuration file, but I can also configure some of the menu in individual pages. So, like I think. So in the on the page for my software page, I've said that this software page is part of the main menu and given it a weight of 2. So it sort of comes sorted after the blog item in the menu, which I had given a weight of 1. And that's how I just sort of forced the ordering of some of these things.
If you wanted that as a sidebar instead of a header,
yeah. That would be a different template, yes.
Yeah.
Or I could sort of provide some of my own templates which override what the theme provides. So there are various possibilities. But yeah, I guess I was going to just demonstrate sort of changing some stuff on the website and having it automatically show up. So like, yeah, so I've got some information about. So, for instance, if I wanted to deface the website, so I've got to save it. It's coming. Oh no, that's the main web. Sorry, what am I doing? I'll start again. Okay, that was the published version of the website. Let's see if I run Hugo server -d. As I was describing, this is sort of running a local version of the website, binding on localhost. So again, this is basically looking the same as a published version because it's identical, but I was now looking at that website and put those things. It's automatically sort of reloaded the website, and I've got the that crap there. So I've defaced the website, and if I did want to go one step further, let's create a branch, and so this is on that branch, on the plug demo branch rather than the main branch, and I can push the change up to GitHub. And GitHub's noticed I've uploaded a new branch. And you can see the change there. And I can create a pull request if I wanted to. And if I wait a little while, Netlify's noticed. And it's doing some stuff. This is sort of shows that there is a log for what's happening with the deployment. Oh, it's already done. And it's created a deploy preview of my defaced version of the website. So again, this is deploy preview to James H. Netlify, and if I look around, oh look, there's, yeah, so that was sort of an example of how you could sort of, I can sort of demonstrate some of those changes. So I'm probably going to decide I'm not going to merge that, and we'll delete the branch as well. So again, that was sort of one of the ways I could sort of go through, just say doing a deploy preview of some of the changes. But yeah, as far as doing changes online, just running Hugo server, it's basically generated the website almost instantly. It sort of says there's 57 pages. It's got 75 static files and a bunch of aliases and a sitemap and a few other bits and pieces which it's generated. I guess probably one of the other sites we could probably show we've got is the plug website itself, which we are building with Hugo. I didn't have a tab for this open, but
Well, also had. Yes. I think test. I think Bilal online also had an example in mind with a sidebar with menu templates. So I've got a link here from gohugo.io, such templates, a menu template. Try that link.
yeah, so so if I look inside the theme, it would be doing the same thing. I've sort of tried to stray away from just showing all the stuff we could do with templates, but yeah, this is something you'd need to worry about if you are writing your own theme or trying to modify some or override some stuff on themes. But I think we could probably see there is. Have I lost? Okay. Okay. So again, I think if I look for sites.menu.main, we can probably find that in the inside the theme directory. So, oops. Oh, site.menus. Yeah, I'm just. I don't know where they've. I haven't actually checked where they're using the menus, so. Right, I think it is using some of the. I haven't actually checked in the exactly what's everything that's going on inside that theme, but is this just sort of ignoring it because I'm inside the wrong repository? Anyway, we've got there is a bunch of templates which are being used inside that theme, part of which would generate the menu. So I think we've probably got some of these things. I don't know if it's a site. Maybe it's a site navigation we've got here. Here, site.menus.main. So again, this is sort of the same kind of template code which Bilal found on the on the Hugo website. Actually, if we are just sort of talking a bit about some of the templating stuff, I'd probably say, I guess one of the other examples I'd used on my own website, I'd overrode some templates to provide sort of a photo gallery on my site. So this particular case, we've got pages which are just sort of showing a bunch of the photos, and there, if I look at the equivalent files, here I've actually built some custom. I've made use of the front matter stuff here to sort of programmatically sort of define all of my photos just as sort of inside as sort of some structured metadata at the start of the document. So here it's here I've got sort of like an array of dictionaries, sort of one of the with the keys for the images with some links to a copy of it on Google Photos, and then another one for thumbnail, and just repeat that over and over again. And then I've got a bit of a description there which came up here in the page. And I think here is sort of the template which I wrote to sort of show that. So basically it's sort of reusing some of the existing template stuff from an ANC, using the same page header, and then I've sort of included including sort of the titles. There is the main content which we got from the document, and then at the end I've put a gallery here where I'm sort of iterating over all of the photos which I specified in the page metadata, and then generating some HTML which displays each of the displays sort of shows the thumbnail with a link to the full-sized image, and then at the bottom I'm including a bit of extra CSS and some JavaScript to run a lightbox style photo viewer, which basically knows that I can point it at the gallery and then it will scan through and allows me to sort of browse through all of those images. So I can sort of that's sort of something which I just built sort of as a custom thing for my website. Probably something I could publish as a Hugo plugin, but I haven't done it yet. Yeah, so those were, I think those are probably the most interesting things I've got on my own website. The main plug website, here we haven't actually used a theme in the configuration file. Basically that means that the only templates which are in use are the ones which are provided by the theme itself. So here we've sort of got a default theme which again, it sort of all looks sort of like most of the other website. Looks similar to a lot of the other ones, but it's a lot simpler because we haven't tried to sort of be quite as adventurous with the plug website. But again, it would be fairly easy to switch to one of the existing Hugo themes. I think we've sort of got an example in the header. Where we're sort of doing the CSS. So here we've sort of specified that we are using that we've written all of our CSS in the SCSS format, which is something which is sort of an enhanced version of CSS, and we're telling Hugo that we want it to convert it to CSS, and sort of remove a lot of the extra white space which isn't needed, and fingerprint it, which means it'll rather than just using the calling it main.css, it's going to sort of take a hash of the CSS and use that as part of the file name, which is kind of a useful feature for this kind of stuff, so that if I change the CSS, it doesn't matter that some other web browser's got a cached version of it. It's always going to get the most recent version to match whatever the page is. So I think you can probably see.
That's a neat effect on the static side.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, we've got our assets.css, which is basically just sort of, it looks similar to your normal CSS, but you can define variables, and you can define colors in terms of other colors, and you can do various other things. I think a lot of this SCSS was written by Luke John. Yeah, cascading style sheets, yeah.
What is it?
It provides you a way of, CSS can be used as a way of styling HTML. So like you can say that you want sort of the body text of your website to be displayed in this font at this size, and you can sort of control where things are positioned. Yeah, you can. So, yeah.
So it means, for example, indentations or presentations?
So, in general, you've got your HTML file, which is sort of mostly being generated from the Markdown, which we generated, which is sort of going to say, this is a paragraph of text, this is an ordered list or something, and then the CSS might say how to display these things. So it might say, I want to have this much. I want to have this much of a padding in between paragraphs. I think you can sort of say that, like, you could sort of do hanging indents to allow, like, indent the first line of a paragraph if you like that style. You can do all these sort of things in CSS. But it can also be used to sort of say that I want this block of stuff to be. I think just giving an example, like. There would be sort of the positioning of all of these elements is done with CSS, for instance. But yeah, again, I think here on the plug website CSS, it's not particularly, it's fairly simple. It's not using a lot of the SCSS stuff, but again, it's sort of doing things like saying, taking particular types of elements, changing the margins or padding, changing the fonts to use to display things. I think we've got some stuff to sort of to change how some images are presented. It's hard to sort of I haven't actually sort of looked at exactly what everything on the plug website is, because I didn't design a lot of this. This is sort of came from some previous members. I can show you what the that SCSS turns into. So there is the plug website. We look at the source code. Here we've got the link to main.css, but it's got this big long hash in the name. And when I said it was removing all of the extraneous white space, that included all the new lines. But that's slightly faster to send to. We could probably turn off the minification a bit, but yeah. That's sort of some of the kind of stuff you can do. I would say for the plug website at the moment, we've sort of got 2 copies of it. One of them is being published by GitHub Pages, and another copy is being served from one of the plug servers directly. the copy we are showing through GitHub Pages, it's being published through a GitHub Actions workflow. So again, sort of got a workflow here, which is basically just saying, check out the saying run whenever someone pushes to the master or the main branch. I think we just got them. I think we're still called the master branch, but anyway, either of those. And it's saying run one job when that happens, running it on Ubuntu latest. We're running a number of steps. The first step is to check out the repository. The next one, we're telling it to install Hugo. So again, I've used the snap here just because that's the easiest way of setting it up on an Ubuntu virtual machine. Just sort of then configuring the Git identity because we're some of the Hugo stuff because we're asking it to sort of use Git to look into, because we're going to be committing some stuff back up to GitHub to the Git repository. Just set what the username should be for those commits. So again, here it's basically just setting it to this GH, this whoever is sort of running this, who is considered the actor running this particular action. Then we're running a script to build the website, and finally, I'm pushing the GitHub, the GH Pages branch back up to the origin server, which will then get noticed by GitHub and pushed up to the Pages website. So I think we've got our build to GH Pages script, which again, it's basically just, it's a little bit complicated. It's sort of using the work tree feature to make another branch available. And then it's making the, deleting the GH Pages branch, then creating the GH and then exporting the, and then creating the GH Pages branch again and making it available in the public folder. Then I run Hugo, which will build the site to that public folder, which is now part of that new branch. And then I'm just sort of adding this little NoJekyll file, which you need to set for GitHub so that it doesn't accidentally think that it's using a different static site generator. That's something which maybe won't be necessary in the future. And I just added everything and then committed it to that branch. Do you have a question, Lloyd?
Yeah, so I just thought it was interesting to, so all the source is in the master or main branch?
Yes.
And all the rendered is in the
Yeah.
Pages branch.
So you can even see that in the repository. So this is sort of saying that Nutmeg 57 would have been who we committed as, and this was an automatic commit sort of created by that. This is an automatic commit created by that GitHub Actions workflow. And as you can see, this looks quite different to the source of the site because it's built everything and you've got a bunch of HTML instead. So just go to the events page, you've got an index, index.html, and it's you've got all of the main content just down here, and everything else is generated by the templates effectively. And I think we've also got an RSS feed here, which I don't know if we're linking to in our templates, but yeah. So that sort of provides some of that extra information, and I think we've also generated a sitemap. So again, this is sort of something which can be used by web search engines to be able to find everything on the website rather than having to follow all of the links to recursively find everything. So we sort of provide that, which is that was automatically generated by Hugo as well. I think those were the main things I wanted to demo. suppose the only other thing I did mention, there was a lot of themes. I suppose I may as well show the there's the Hugo themes website, which sort of has some themes. So a lot of these things would be like a one-line change to the configuration, and to switch a website to use one of these themes, you might sort of need some additional configuration depending on what customization the theme allows. But in general, there's a lot of places you can start with. Yeah, still going. Oh, there's one. You like your website to look like a BIOS screen in your... Yeah. So you can basically make your... There's a lot of options here. Yeah, I think those are most of the things I wanted to demo. So I guess I just wonder if there's any more questions people have.
Just to reiterate, James, when you had a GitLab repo for TLS, you needed to, or with Let's Encrypt, you needed to manually do the.
Yes. So I think. Yeah. So I think in the GitLab pages.
Yeah, they have Acme, but whether that.
No, you can just use there's a way to do the Let's Encrypt to get it to renew automatically.
I think you can use Let's Encrypt to. Well, you can use Let's Encrypt tools to generate the certificates, but you need to upload them.
Yeah, you still need to transfer them to the
Let's see. Oh, so Let's Encrypt integration. Is that new? Or? I was looking at this just earlier, and it seemed to be saying that you need to do it automatically. When I was looking through the documentation, it seemed to be pointed me at a site which is sort of saying you can run the Let's Encrypt script to generate all of your generate your certificate, and then go to the GitLab website to upload the new certificate and set a calendar reminder for 90 days to do it again.
Yeah, that's what like you can set a contract to do. Renew it every 90 days.
Yeah, it's just something to keep in mind.
Okay. So this does seem to be saying it does have Let's Encrypt. So maybe what I wrote on the slide was wrong, and GitLab is also awesome and will do things automatically. Yeah, unless this is just the enterprise edition and doesn't cover the user version. Yeah, I don't know. So, yes.
What about dynamic data, for example, a sensor or a camera image?
So if you do need to do dynamic data, then you're going to need to have something running on the server. So that won't be a static site. But again, one possibility is to sort of have if you can separate out the dynamic parts, you could, like if you've got, say, a server which is just publishing an image, then you could link to that image from your static site and display it within your system. So I mean, that's kind of how I've done the photo gallery on my personal website. All of the images are being served up by Google Photos as sort of an endpoint where I can sort of pick a size I want for the photo, so I can ask it to generate the thumbnails and the full-size versions. My photo galleries are sort of depending on Google Photos staying up, but the bit which is published on the server serving my website, that is static. Yeah. But yeah, again, if you did want to sort of set up a website showing security feeds or or running sort of like a video feed or something, that is going to be more complicated. Do we have any other questions? Oh, over here. It's on. Just speak. It's on. Just speak.
Well, thanks. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Right. Okay, one more question.
Bilal asks, how do we integrate the iframe in Hugo? Is that theme specific or?
You have an iframe.
So, is it an iframe for any particular iframe or what?
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah.
All right, I guess.
Bilal's typing at the moment. Google Calendar, for say.
As it happens, we've actually done this on the Plug website.
Right,
Um,
it's on the Plug website, an example.
I can actually show an example. This is very quick. So, actually, we'll just show the raw version of this because GitHub sort of renders Markdown files by default. But here is an iframe embedding a Google Calendar. One of the things I didn't mention in my little Markdown cheat sheet is that if you write stuff which looks like HTML, it will spit that out into the output as is. So here, there's an iframe, and I think I had to add a little. Sorry. Oh, sorry, Zoo. So yeah, so that's how we've done the calendar embed on the front page of the Plug website. I ended up needing to put a manual line break after the iframe just to sort of fix up. There was some formatting issues, but in general, you do have an escape hatch in Markdown if you want to do something really complicated, but for the most part, I think it's probably better to do these things with either shortcodes or in the templates. So like, I could probably have written a calendar shortcode, and just had it so it would take the Google Calendar ID and generate that iframe for me, which would sort of make that page look a bit simpler. But at the same time, I think we're only showing this calendar on the front page and also the events page. So yeah, it's a bit of a wash over whether it would have been worth doing that or not. And yeah. I didn't want to do anything too complicated on the Plug website because I want other people to be able to update it as well. Yeah.
Anything else in the room or online? Well, I think that's it. Thanks, James. Yeah, great presentation. Thanks very much.